As we prepare for Holy Week, I think there are a couple of things that bear repeating. First of all, the God of the universe is not confined to a brick and mortar structure. So even though we will not be meeting together in a building next Sunday, we're still going to be together celebrating a risen Lord and an empty tomb. The second thing is, Jesus is who he says he is. If you're not really sure and you want to order one more piece of material, I would encourage you to order The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. It's one of the best apologetics books I've ever read, and it lays out the story for Christ in a very reasonable, logical format. As you think about the events of the week, you may be thinking about Palm Sunday. You may be thinking about the waving of palm branches as Jesus is riding his donkey into Jerusalem for the victorious entry. You may be thinking about the Last Supper on Thursday night as Jesus has gathered the apostles in the upper room. You may be thinking about Judas' betrayal, or maybe the arrest in the garden, maybe Peter's denial, or the rushed trials, or the beatings, or maybe the road to Calvary as Jesus is forced to carry his own cross, or maybe the crucifixion itself. But what I want us to consider are 6 more obscure things, exclamation marks, as you will, as God is telling the story and trying to get the people's attention as other things are happening around the crucifixion itself. Scripture tells us that there was extended darkness during the crucifixion. That was no eclipse, that was hours of darkness, not just minutes. Scripture tells us about an earthquake, that while Jesus was hanging on the cross, the entire region experienced a massive earthquake. Scripture talks about opened graves, how the earthquake caused graves to be opened. Scripture tells us about saints being raised and how after the resurrection, those saints went into town to testify as to the deity and the messiahship of Jesus Christ. Scripture tells us about undisturbed grave clothes, that when the apostles went into the grave to look for Jesus' body, they found a cocoon, a hollow cocoon of sorts, where the burial clothes were laying right on the burial shelf where they had left Jesus. The only thing that was disturbed was the face cloth that had been folded and laid to the side. Lastly, the rending of the temple veil from top to bottom. One of the things that you need to look up in Jewish dictionaries is the makeup of the temple veil and what that would have looked like, the thickness, the width, the height. It was a massive piece of fabric. It wasn't just like ripping your shirt and tearing that, but the temple veil was torn from top to bottom, not bottom to top, but top to bottom, and giving us the opportunity to experience God himself and go into the Holy of Holies for ourselves. As you contemplate the events of Holy Week, whether it's the more obvious things or the more obscure things, I pray that all of this brings you into a deeper worship experience on Sunday as we celebrate the risen Lord together. Have a great day.